Most developers think starting a business is risky, but in 2026, playing it safe is the actual trap. You see, when I was a junior developer, I watched hundreds of developers get blindsided by a market that simply changed overnight. And I myself would have been one of them if I hadn't started my very own 7-figure AI B2B consulting firm. So in this video, I am breaking down 5 reasons why starting a business now is the only way to avoid wasting years on a career that you can lose overnight as a software engineer. Reason number 1 is that you are actually way ahead of the world, but you are trapped in the wrong game. You see, as developers, we suffer from something called the curse of knowledge. You work with systems, automation, and tools every single day. To you, connecting a database to the front end or automating a workflow is basically second nature. You might even call it mundane. It's just a regular Tuesday. But here's the variable that you are forgetting. You are literally light years ahead of the average human being when it comes to understanding what is possible with technology. To the average business owner, so the dentist, the lawyer, the logistics manager, what you do as a software engineer isn't just tech, it is literally magic to them. And most of the world does not run on optimized code. In fact, it runs on messy spreadsheets, manual data entry, and human error. They don't even know that their pain can be automated, let alone utilize software to solve. And here's the tragedy of the 9-to-5 job. In a job, you can never fully leverage this insane asymmetric advantage. You are simply told what to build, you are told who to build for, and you are just a high-performance engine stuck in a traffic jam of bureaucracy. You execute the ticket, but you only capture a tiny fraction of the value that you actually create, obviously in the form of a salary. But when you start a business, you flip that equation on its head. Instead of being the person who executes the ticket, you now become the person who is actually responsible for the ticket and the one defining what the ticket is in the first place. So you stop saying, I can code this in Python, and you start saying, I understand how technology works, and I can remove this pain point for you. And the best part about this is that in 2026, that leverage is exploding. Every single day, the world becomes more and more digital. We get more tools, more data, more volume. The noise is increasing. And you as a software engineer are the signal. You are in the perfect position to translate that noise into value and actually get paid for it what you're worth. So this is the best time in history to be a developer, but only if you stop acting like an employee. Reason number 2 is that selling first is now safer than actually building first. And this might be a little counterintuitive to software engineers. In fact, every single developer I know would probably find this difficult to understand. You see, we are taught a very specific linear path in schools, work, and boot camps. We design, we build, we polish, and then we launch. And of course, we hope. We hope that we get clients. We essentially treat business like a lottery ticket. And that is a recipe for failure. And trust me, I learned this the hard way. A few years ago, I remember speaking to a managing partner at a successful law firm down here in LA. I was trying to get them as a client. And this was a very serious law firm. They had over 20 employees, multiple partners, so multiple C-suite execs, and they had steady inbound leads. They were making real money, more money than I had ever seen at the time. And I remember asking this lawyer a very simple, reasonable question. I wanted to make small talk, and I asked, so what software are you guys using to manage all these clients? What's your CRM? And I remember him laughing, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was more of a nervous and embarrassed type of a laugh. I remember what he told me, and I'll never forget. He said, it's honestly kind of a mess. And it turned out that their entire quote-unquote system was a receptionist manually typing leads into an Excel spreadsheet. They had paralegals texting clients from their personal iPhones. They didn't even have any VoIPs, and critical follow-ups were living in people's heads. There was nothing to document how many follow-ups each client got. So they weren't struggling to get clients. However, they were losing hundreds of thousands of dollars because their operations were bleeding so much money. And all these missed appointments and lost files were literally costing them tens of thousands of dollars every single week. And this was really the first time when it kind of clicked for me. I didn't need to build a complex SaaS product from scratch. and hope that these firms liked it. All I needed to do was work backwards. I had to sell the clarity first that I could solve their problem. So essentially, what you have to do is you get paid to audit what is breaking. You quantify the revenue leakage, and then you show them where the money is actually slipping through the cracks. And only then do you build. So if you want to think of this like an algorithm, it's pretty simple. Audits lead to validation, validation leads to automation, and then automation leads to software. So at a big tech job, you commit effort first and maybe get rewarded later. But in a business, you're allowed to charge before you commit. Because in 2026, building first is actually the risky move. And selling certainty, I would say, is the safe one. And just to clarify, when I say start a business, I do not mean you quit your job tomorrow and you try to build the next Facebook or Apple. What I'm talking about is learning how to take the skills that you already have as a software engineer and turning them into leverage. That's exactly what I teach inside CodeToCEO. I work with dozens of developers who want to transition from employees to owners without blowing up their lives or taking reckless risks. So if you are a software engineer making over $10,000 a month and you want to see the same exact blueprint, then book a free strategy call down in the description below with me personally. Reason number 3 is where most developers actually get distracted by the shiny object. Most people will think that AI, which is currently the biggest shiny object in the world, is to your advantage, and it is where you're supposed to be. But I would argue that where you stand is the biggest advantage. Most people will talk about AI like it's a gift from God, and while that's partially true, you have to look at the second order effects of AI. Because AI is now mostly everywhere, ideas have become very cheap. Execution has become relatively free, and if everyone has a supercomputer in their pocket, then the baseline for quote-unquote intelligence resets to 0. So if AI isn't directly your unfair advantage, then what is? Well, it's actually the one variable that most people are ignoring, you included most likely. It is your physical reality, and I call this the proximity protocol. So let's assume there's a developer named Buggo. He didn't start with a $1 billion idea, rather he started with his location. He was living in Los Angeles, and he was surrounded by law firms, medical practices, entertainment businesses, and a plethora of other businesses, including blue-collar work. So most of these businesses were very high revenue, but they had messy operations. And by just being there, he saw that their systems were held together by duct tape, pretty much. And he had an infinite source of validated pain points right at his doorstep every single day. And this wasn't because he was the smartest coder, but it was all because he was present and he put himself out there to identify these pain points. So a business forces you to monetize your specific vantage point. A 9-to-5 does the exact opposite. It puts blinders on you. It narrows your world down to a ticket, a stand-up meeting, or someone else's internal metrics. So this week, don't just sit in front of your setup thinking of ideas. Actually go out, speak to people in your networks, speak to business owners in your local area. Just talk to 3 people around you in your city and ask them one simple question. What is the most annoying, time-consuming thing in your operation right as of this moment? And if you hear the same problem twice, that is most likely a good opportunity right there for you to capitalize on. That is, in essence, a validated signal in a world full of noise. Now, moving on to reason number 4, and this one will hurt, and that is that code expires faster than credibility. You see, the reality is that the tools that you master today will be obsolete in a few years, if not less. Frameworks change, stacks rotate, even entire roles at your job could disappear tomorrow. So if your only asset is code, you are pretty much on a treadmill that is speeding up. And you have to run faster and faster just to stay in the same exact place. But when it comes to relationships, it's a little different because relationships compound. So when you build a business, even a very simple one, you are converting these short half-life skills, which is essentially your code, into long half-life assets, which is trust, specifically the trust of your clients. because clients do not remember the syntax that you use or the programming language that you use. Rather, they remember that you helped them make more money, that you helped them save more time. Partners remember that you removed friction from their lives. And that reputation is extremely durable. It creates a flywheel of trust that leads to referrals, distribution, and authority. So these things do not just reset to zero when a new version of a framework comes out. A job keeps you trapped in a cycle of learning new tools to solve old problems, but a business actually allows you to escape that cycle and build equity in yourself. And trust will always outlive technology. So you can start building your credibility today. All you have to do is just pick a problem that you have potentially already helped somebody with, even a small one, and write it out exactly like this. What was broken? What did you change? And what result was created? And that's pretty much it. One clear before and after story is more valuable than literally learning 10 new frameworks. And reason number 5 is this. You are already taking entrepreneurial risk, you just aren't getting paid for it. Most developers live with a massive cognitive dissonance. You see, most of you think you are safe, but look at your actual reality. You live with layoff risk. If the market turns, you are a line item on a spreadsheet. You live with reorganization risk. A new VP comes in and now your project is canceled. You live with manager risk as well. Your quality of life is literally dictated by one person's mood. If they're happy, you're happy. If they're sad, they're gonna make your life miserable. You also live with location and time risk. You are trading your finite hours for a capped salary. And worst of all, you have to ask for permission to even take a vacation. So you are bearing all the downside of a business owner, but with none of the upside. So starting a business in this case literally helps you with the risk. It aligns your risk that you're already taking with a proper reward. In a business, if you take the risk and you execute, you keep the upside. You capture that value. And let's say even if you fail, you still keep the lesson, you keep the skill, and you keep the network and everything else you developed. I mean, just ask yourself right now, what risk am I already taking at my current job that I do not get paid extra for? I'm sure most of you watching this are putting in long hours, you're stressed, there's the job uncertainty, there's the location limits, there's all these things that you're already dealing with. But if you redirect 5 to 10 hours a week into something that you actually own, it will actually start compounding over weeks and months and potentially years. So now that you understand why starting a business matters in 2026, the obvious question now becomes, okay, Bago, but how do I actually do this? And what can I do right now? And that's exactly what I break down in this video right over here. I will show you step by step how to start the business from complete scratch as a software engineer, even if you have no idea yet what to build. As always, thank you so much for watching and have a good one.